I found, Jeff, that this book, I'm just talking it up to people, and it's very important to me. And I want to read just to illustrate some of what you were just saying and what you were saying last about the overself.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe you can highlight a little bit more for our listeners as well to get a clear. It's all in this book. You can read it. This book is very clear. The ego self is the creature born out of man's own doing and thinking, slowly changing and growing. The overself is the image of God, perfect, finished, and changeless. What he has to do, if he is to fulfill himself, is to let the one shine through the other. How close is his relationship to that other self, that godlike overself? And not only his mind's relationship, but also his body's. For in the center of every cell in blood, marrow, flesh, and bone, there is the void that holds and is pure spirit. The ego is not really killed. How without body and intellect, emotion, and will could anyone act in this world? But the center of being is moved out of it to the overself.
Yes, you're right.
There it is.
Yes.
And this is something I think is so important in so many ways. One is that we're not in an antagonistic relationship with ourselves or with our ego. It is a vehicle in which we are moving into the overself.
Yeah, one should have great respect for the long struggle that one goes through many lives to develop the personality and its talents to become something that can really express the higher self. People tend to confuse what I like to call the personality with what I would call the ego. And even in PB's writing, sometimes it's not always clear. He talks of ego, personality, they seem somewhat exchangeable. The personality is like all your processes of your thinking, your feeling, willing, the impulses, your intuitions, your imagination, creativity, your ability to create things. They're all part of the personality. That by itself is fine, as you read. The overself, which lives in an eternal present, it's active in the eternal present, is not a form. It's not a content. It's not something that you can grasp like you grasp, your phone or your cell phone or whatever. It's not something like that. It informs. Its intelligence guides, but intelligence is like formless in itself. If you know what I'm saying, it's like something like sunlight that pervades. But you don't actually see light, right? You see what it is lighting.
Yes.
It's like the overself is your awareness. You don't see the awareness. You can't know that power of knowing, which is your overself. But you do know what it's revealing to you. And so what I was trying to say before, when we talk about giving up the ego, it doesn't mean, it's not like suicide, right? We're not trying to kill the personality or beat ourselves down in some way to submission, like some kind of ascetic, treatment of oneself. A certain discipline is necessary on the long path. We understand that. But it's really that what you read, the shift of one's identity or a sense of being to the overself from the personality. Then the personality remains less, not an obstacle anymore, although the development of personality goes on forever. It's not like you cross the finish line and there's nothing more to learn. What you realize when you realize the goal of the short path is who you really are. But now you've got the alignment and the integrity is in place, now the personality can really serve that. And it continues to grow and learn. The virtues, as the Dalai Lama has expressed, and I've seen elsewhere, the virtues can grow forever. It's our ignorance that can come to an end. And the ignorance is the thinking that we are less than what we actually are.
Yes.
Did you follow? Is that clear?
Yes, it is clear.
It always bothers me when people are beating up on themselves. Oh, I'm so bad about blah, 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 blah. Because it's kind of sad because it shows in a way that you don't actually believe that divinity is within you, that, the Christ is in your heart. And in those moments of beating, if one really thought that the divine was present here and now in this moment, you would just become silent. You wouldn't engage in a kind of self-flagellation. You'd respect how far you've come in this life and how many things you have learned. And at the same time, love that inner source of your being that's been guiding this whole process through incarnations.
It's an amazing journey once we can open ourselves up to that.
Yes, and I think the book serves this purpose in a way because it lays out the whole path. It discusses the long path, the short path, how you move from one to the other, warnings about jumping to the short path too soon or slightly misguidedly, practices, for the short path, and some of the results that can come, and the nature of the sage as well at the end. So it kind of gives you an overview of the path. You can read it and kind of say, oh yeah, I kind of get this part, but I'm still working on that part. And it's a system which can be applied to anybody's practice. It's not like it's part of a given religious path with a certain tradition to it, like Christianity or Tibetan Buddhism or various, Advaita Vedanta or different other traditions. It's not. It's kind of extracted out of that. PB, his mastery was kind of to revision for people the Asian traditions, but in a terminology, he uses very few, Asian terms, in a terminology that, and a kind of way of expressing that's directly understood, easily understood by Western readers. So that's one reason I really like him. He's very straightforward, and he orients one as quickly as possible to one's own inner being as the source that we would have the most respect for. Even if we follow other teachers and, our path leads us one way or another. I've certainly followed many different pathways and sub-pathways, but always come back to one's own sense that the real goodness is within me, and if I turn to it, answers will come. Like sometimes if you're working on a problem and you kind of exhaust yourself, you just can't make the decision one way or another. Sometimes, the common wisdom is we'll sleep on it. Well, actually, sleep is very close to the Overself. And waking up from sleep, if you've had something bothering you, sometimes the answer just is right there. The clarity is there. There's various techniques for these things, and that's one kind of exercise one can do to help orient oneself to one's own inner being as the source of guidance.
There's a lot to be said for intuition. Just an inner knowing. Maybe it's grace that bestows. It is grace that bestows on us this knowledge that we don't know where it came from, but we have it.
Yes, and the lucky hunches or that kind of sense of guidance.
Yeah,
it's good to know the source. There's so much about what we normally think of as our self, just in the ordinary sense. There's so much about it that flows. It's like the grace flowing into us. We just don't recognize the source. We don't see that it's really coming from within us. And if we would reorient ourselves consciously in that direction, the flow gets stronger and stronger.
Yes, and then we're encouraged because we know we are stepping into the flow, and
that's right.
And then we see the results. I can say for sure that parts of my life have been surrendered to this, and for instance, the way this show works. Very little effort. I've just surrendered it all. It almost seems. I mean, I do the legwork and everything, but I totally trust what's happening, as if there's like this invisible hand working in this.
Yes, bringing you various people, situations, books. I don't know what
Absolute,
all, music,
everything.
That you become when you put yourself in the flow.
Yeah,
it just gets stronger. Usually, if your intentions are good, which obviously they are.
Yeah.
Then often the universe will reinforce you. Unless, it's not 100%, you can't always predict the outcome. That's what grace means. Grace could be the hard times that fall on you that cause you to reorient parts of yourself that are a little bit, stiff and unyielding and, biased one way or another or whatever. But, that sometimes worldly trouble is really grace in disguise.
And that is grace too. But insofar as this show is concerned, in the radio work that I do here at the station, it feels the hard part is not there. Is that part of grace? It's just the effortless flow. I mean, I do the work. I read the books. I put together a newsletter. Obviously it takes effort on my part to walk from my car, and we don't have a parking lot that's right near the building. So I walk a little ways. You got to carry material. You got to prepare and bring the material. You've got to take time out. But that's all. That's because my intention is so strong in doing it, and yet, because I'm totally committed. So, but I feel like I got a helping hand in this.
Yes, well, you sound like you're inspired by it, and that very inspiration is a gift of grace.
It is a gift from grace. I want to make sure people know that they can go to paulbrunton.org, paulbrunton.org, and to further explore his teachings and books on most every aspect of the spiritual path. And since I've picked up this book and started reading in preparation for this show, Jeff, I've been so happy. I brought this to an ashram this past weekend, and it was the perfect book to read in such a peaceful setting in downstate New York called Ananda Ashram. They're celebrating their 50th anniversary, founded by Brahmananda Saraswati, formerly Dr. Mishra. And their philosophy is on Vedanta. And I talk with them about this. And, the teachings that they were teaching there was dovetailing so beautifully with what I was reading in the book. It was like, wow, this is great.
Yes. Yeah, I think that you'll find that to be the case with the book. I think that PB, the wisdom that he was offered and that he's brought forth, it has a universal quality to it and a ring of truth.
It really does.
Right. But always, it's not until you get in the boat and start rowing that you find out, for yourself, which is really the important part.
And that's what it is. I've been in the boat rowing, and that's when I picked up the book. I have been rowing the book and then rowing the boat, and here's the book.
Yes.
It's just like confirming what I've been doing.
Yes, it's really wonderful. It's amazing. It's like, there's that Amazing Grace, how sweet it is, the song.
Yes.
And one of the lines is something about who opens your eyes, right? I forget the exact words, maybe who allowed me to see, So it is a greater clarity comes with the proper orientation to one's higher self in life.
I want to
greater clarity naturally comes.
Greater clarity naturally comes. One of the practices that are in this book is about remembrance or act as if, or the two.
That's right.
I like, because when which I've been doing, when you consciously act as if this reality is already true in you, if you already know it's true, it's easier to do that. And so But in order to do that, you have to what are the practices is remembrance. If you don't mind, if I read a little bit more here.
No, please. It's important that you brought that up.
Yeah. One of the most valuable forms of yoga is the yoga of constant remembrance. Its subject may be a mystical experience, intuition, or idea. In essence, it is really an endeavor to insert the transcendental atmosphere into the mundane life. The loving, adoring recollection of the Overself, the constant return to memory of it amid the world's distractions, the reiteration of this divine thought as a permanent background to all other thinking, is itself a yoga path. Indeed, it is the same as that taught by St. Paul when he wrote, "Pray without ceasing and bring every thought into captivity to Jesus Christ." So, I mean, this remembrance, this has been very helpful to me because, because when you forget, then remember again.
Yes, you develop the habit of remembering, and the training of it will actually help you to recall naturally. It'll become more as a natural flow and less of an effort. And that can become a very happy experience. It's part of the reorientation. And people can begin the remembrance of the short path early on in their practice. I mean, Paul Brunton gave me the short path teaching in 1975.
Wow.
Up to then, I was trying to do, spiritual athletics, and I continued to do long path kind of struggles and so on for a long, long time. But that introduction to the short path and the practice of remembrance, stayed with me forever. It's like, what can one actually do more than remembering the divine in each moment? It just provides that, like I said, that it's the orientation that saves you, that really, like in the Amazing Grace song, who saved a wretch like me.
You're right.
Who saved, instead of a wretch, you could substitute, personality-bound, ego-bound, struggling individual, trying to make ends meet,
exactly.
Not seeing any beauty anywhere.
Yeah.
This is the grace that saves you.
Yeah.
So by relinquishing you of yourself in a way, in the end you surrender.
The part that we used to think was ourselves and used to act as if it were ourselves, when we come to this point or part in our process when we recognize it isn't, and we're happy to let it go because we see the burden of it.
Yes, and you just said the key word. You acted as if it was yourself. Now you start acting as if in the short path it's your higher self that's really doing the thing.
Exactly.
It's that part of that reorientation process.
Exactly. That's. I'm so happy to do this.
It is. Paul Brunton in the book somewhere says the proper facial expression for someone on the short path is a smile. Because it's kind of like something, a big secret, and it's really making things click for you.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. I remember that when I read it, and it's so true. You always seen people, spiritual beings that have this contented smile on their face, unforced, just deep contentment.
It's the Buddha's expression, right?
Yeah.
Almost every Buddha you see has that kind of quiet. There's a quietness about it because it's in the silence that the Overself really communicates. And in that silence, there's also, you can feel it. There's a joy.
Yeah, you can feel it. You can feel the presence of the Overself through that person. Yes,
exactly. Yes, when you're around somebody where you feel the quiet, you can also feel a kind of a joy is there with it, and a clarity of mind.
Wow. I'm going through a process. It's very interesting, Jeff, and I'm really enjoying talking about this. Thanks.
Oh, you're welcome. Are we at the end of the show?
We're pretty close to it.
I'd like to mention that the book is published by Larson Publications, and their website is Larson, Larson, publications.com.
Yes.
And it's on their front page. And also the paulbrunton.org site really is full of information.
Yeah.
You can read, there are a lot of teachings available on that site. just to go and explore the links. I think you'll find it quite a satisfying meal.
Yes, paulbrunton.org. And also, I'm glad you mentioned Larson Publications because they publish a lot of good books. A lot of
Yes, they publish
books.
the entire they publish a lot of good spiritual literature, but also the 16-volume notebooks of Paul Brunton that contain much of his writing he did that was never published until Larson Publication published it. It's his mature work. So anyway, you could explore around the Paul Brunton books that Larson Publications has on their site.
Well, you know, I've heard of Paul Brunton. I think I may have read something about from him a long time ago. But this book has really opened my eyes to the amazing clarity of his description of the path. I've never quite read it like this. I have to admit, I read a lot of books and I have a lot of guests on my program, but the way it's presented here, it's like a breath of fresh air. It really comes through really clear. Long path, short path, what it means. Maybe it's just because it's just describing in a lot of ways what has been my journey,
Yes, probably a lot of people's journey.
And probably a lot of people's journey. So, let me just read finally just something about the short path. The Overself is not a goal to be attained, but a realization of what already is. It is in the inalienable possession of all conscious beings and not a mere few. No effort is needed to get hold of the Overself, but every effort is needed to get rid of the many impediments to its recognition. We cannot take hold of it. It takes hold of us. Therefore, the last stage of this quest is an effortless one. We are led as children by the hand into the resplendent presence. Our weary strivings come to an abrupt end. Our lips are made shut and wordless. I think I can end it on that.
Yes, that's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'd love to have further conversations with you sometime on the program if you're open to it, Jeff.
Of course, anytime, Gary, and I'll send you an email after this, and also, so we'll be in touch.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for inviting.
Okay, take care.
Bye.